I've never shared my testimony before, partly because I didn't feel like my testimony was big enough. I don't have a big miracle and healing experience, so I didn't think it was really powerful without that. But something that an older gentleman said to me one day really changed my perspective on that. So when I was a teenager, I vividly remember when I would do wrong or if I would commit certain sins, I would have a vision of Jesus walking through the desert, pulling a cross. And almost like the vision would get closer and closer to him until I could see his face, and then he would look up at me. And it scared me because he had blood and scars all on his face. And for some reason, I felt like it was my fault. Like whatever happened to him, I contributed to it. And he didn't look angry. He looked disappointed. So the crazy thing about that is I didn't grow up in a religious household and I wasn't a believer yet. So fast forward, when I graduated from high school, I basically had an identity crisis because when I was in high school, I was popular for music and dance. And I basically tied my identity to the things that I did. So once high school was over, I basically had the feeling like I wasn't important anymore because I had a lot of childhood trauma. So that was the beginning of a downward spiral for me. And it was the first time I came face to face with depression. So I asked myself that summer, if I died, would I go to heaven or hell? And I knew that I wouldn't make it to heaven if I was judged right then and there because I was living in sin. And that scared me, but it made me feel like I had a choice. Like I didn't have to stay in sin even though I was living in it. The truth is I was lost and I didn't know that I was lost. So I reached my lowest point mentally and emotionally, and I basically just got into a really dark place. One day I was alone in my mom's apartment and I felt like I heard the voice of God speak to me for the first time, and it was audible. It scared the mess out of me. I'm not going to front. Even though it scared me, that was the beginning of my real relationship with God. Now, what he said to me was that he wanted me to change my life around. He wanted me to repent of my sins. It was like he basically told me, okay, do these things and then come back and talk to me. And it felt like his presence left. Like it was the scariest thing in the world. I really don't know if me explaining it could do it justice. So of course I was obedient to God. I got married. I changed my life around. I changed my ways. But when I had that experience, it was like I couldn't really tell my family because number one, I knew that they wouldn't believe me. And two, I felt like they gonna think I'm a whole weirdo. It was like I couldn't really share it, but I couldn't really keep it to myself either. It was a very hard thing to navigate. God saw me through it, but I went through a tremendous amount of spiritual warfare at that time. So I started changing. My homies couldn't really relate to me anymore. I couldn't really relate to them anymore. A lot of what Jesus said started to make sense to me because it started to feel like I had to choose between being the person that God called me to be and having a relationship with a lot of the people that I love. That didn't seem fair to me. In fact, it really made me upset at the time. But I understand now that you basically have to be willing to choose your relationship with God and who he's called you to be over anything and anyone. And sometimes that's the price of walking in the faith that he's called you to, which is really hard to accept in the beginning, but you got to choose. I became cool with being the outcast if that was going to mean that I was going to be the person who God called me to be. And if that meant that people didn't like me anymore or people didn't want to be around me anymore, I just became cool with it. I felt free for the first time ever. And I just started looking at everything in life differently after that point. I became a different person. My desires were different and I wanted to live holy after that. I wanted to minister to my friends and my family and people that I knew and that I came across, but I felt like some people don't believe if there's no sign or miracle, and Jesus actually spoke about that in the Bible. So one day this older gentleman said to me, the real miracle is you. Like, I know you want people to see signs and wonders. I know you want them to see miracles and things like that because you want them to have the faith that you have now. But the fact that he's changed you, the fact that you've become a completely different person and the desires of your heart aren't the same anymore, and the fact that you actually want to seek him first, that's the real miracle right there. My hope in sharing this is that if you're a believer and your testimony is not really crazy or miraculous and things like that, I hope you understand that shining your light and being the person that God has called you to be is going to draw people to Christ. So if you walk according to your purpose and you be the person that he's called you to be, you don't really need a big miracle and things like that for people to see the light and to believe, because the real miracle is you. Grace and peace. This joint bussin'.